After Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, promised another independence referendum, we're asking, is now the right time to rerun the campaign of 2014? We're joined by Christopher McEleny, General Secretary of the Alba Party, and Brian Monteith, the former Tory MSP, Brexit Party MEP and columnist at the Scotsman. Gentlemen, thank you both for your time. Christopher, if I can start with you. This will be no more, surely, than an advisory plebiscite, because if Westminster doesn't give it legal authority, even if Nicola Sturgeon goes ahead with the referendum, the unionists will say, we're not touching it with the barge pole, we're not going to play, we're not going to vote, and therefore you can claim you've won, but only 40% of the electorate have even voted. It's totally illegitimate.
Well, good afternoon. I certainly think you're in line for a BAFTA for the fantasy introduction to today's show. Will it be an advisory referendum? Well, the Brexit referendum was an advisory referendum. That wasn't binding on the UK government or indeed the UK Parliament, and despite the fact that in that advisory referendum, 2/3 of the people of Scotland voted to remain in the EU, we were dragged out of the EU. Now, there's a clear precedent was set in 2012 when Alex Salmond signed the Edinburgh Agreement with David Cameron. You know, there's an overwhelming majority of parliamentarians in the Scottish Parliament that support having a referendum on Scottish independence. It would be completely anti-democratic to suggest that the will of the Scottish Parliament and the will of the Scottish people expressed through their government should simply be ignored because Boris Johnson and his cohort of cronies in Westminster are scared to have a referendum because they don't think they'll win it. Now, I don't think you have to waste any time testing the question for a referendum. All of that was done over 10 years ago. This is a key question of democracy. Do you believe that in elections, when political parties stand on manifestos and win overwhelming mandates to enact the result of that election, that we should simply ignore it because you don't like the result? Now, you mentioned in your introduction quite ridiculously about Vladimir Putin would be wanting Scotland to win independence. Now, it was actually David Cameron that asked Vladimir Putin to in the 2014 referendum.
Christopher, why is it ridiculous? Why is it ridiculous to remind people of what the Intelligence and Security Committee found, which was that the Kremlin had sought to interfere in the Let me start again. Why do you say it's ridiculous to point out to people that the Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament pointed out that the 2014 election had been susceptible to the cyber influencers paid for by the Kremlin? It's perfectly reasonable in terms of realpolitik to see why it would be that Russia would want to see the breakup of the United Kingdom. We are the most powerful military force in Europe. Look at what we've done in Ukraine. Of course they'd want to do that. Anyway, you say it's ridiculous. I say, look at what the Intelligence and Security Committee had to say. Hang on, you've had your say now, Christopher. You're going to shut up for a little bit, and we're going to hear from the other guests. That's the way it works. Brian Monteith, will this vote happen? Will it be legitimate?
Hello, Colin. I don't think this vote will happen. I think this is all a charade. This is about Nicola Sturgeon trying to appeal to her core support and indeed to supporters who split off, like Chris, to form other parties because she's not doing enough in their eyes. The fact is that she does not have a mandate. She, even adding in the support for the Greens, did not pass 50% of the voting public, never mind 50% of those able to vote. So she has no mandate. And indeed, in the election, she was even appealing for people who did not support independence or did not want a referendum now to still vote for her. So her mandate is false. Then we have the practicalities of trying to deliver it without the consent. Because she has no legal ability to deliver it, she needs to actually work through the delivery of local councils, closing schools and libraries and such like, to hold the referendum. Now, that's open to court judgment by people taking actions against their councils for spending their money on running a referendum. The SNP does not control a majority of local councils. There are many councils run by Labour and Liberal Democrats and Conservative coalitions, and the likelihood is they would be very wary and probably not actually run the referendum she might want to have. In which case, you would find parts of Scotland not participating. Then on top of that, you actually have the heavy likelihood that people who want to remain British because they believe they're Scottish and British would simply not vote. And we would then go back to the situation that happened in Catalonia, where an illegal referendum had no jurisdiction to actually take Catalonia out of Spain. So it's actually all about creating an argument with Westminster so she is denied the referendum. And that gives her the ability to appeal to her supporters.
Christopher McEleny, are people in Scotland really ready for a rerun of such a toxic political contest that left families riven in 2014?
Yeah, I mean, there's been 3 Prime Ministers, there's been 5 UK governments, there's been 60-odd% of the Scottish population that voted against Brexit since the last referendum. So, this nonsense about once in a generation, how do you quantify a generation? Well, 3 Prime Ministers, 5 UK governments, been dragged out of the EU against your will, having all of the major decisions on, the cost of living crisis imposed upon you. These are all material changes I think people are ready to reset in Scotland and think again. It was £2 a litre of fuel for me to fill up my car yesterday. It stopped at £99. I couldn't even get a full tank into the car. Whereas in Scotland, we've got an abundance of natural resources. People in Scotland are seeing their electricity bills soar when we can supply every single home in Scotland through renewable electricity, and we're self-sufficient in oil and gas. So, these are compelling arguments to people that are feeling the pinch at the moment and ask themselves, well, why? You spoke about all these great things that flowed out of the Union. Well, billions upon billions of pounds, $1 trillion worth in the Norwegian oil fund has flowed out of the Scottish North Sea into London to fund Trident and illegal wars and other Westminster vanity projects.
We've got 1 minute left. I wanted to just ask Brian Monteith, what do Scots get out of the Union? If Christopher McEleny is saying, look at how we could stand alone and affluent, and it's not good enough to say, well, look, they got the Oxford vaccine. What do Scots get positively from membership of the Union of the United Kingdom right now?
Well, it's very simple. We are a family. We actually are Scottish and British, just as you are English and British. We pool and share our resources. When we actually have downturns and we have problems in Scotland, such as not having ambulances to collect people, such as not being able to run our own test and trace, such as vaccinations, then what do? We actually turn to the rest of the UK for help. That's the sort of sharing that goes on. And it goes on and has been going on for 300 years. So we're interwoven. And so our businesses work together. Our education systems work together. Our families work together. Our culture works together. All of that is interlinked and interwoven. And it's no surprise, therefore, that Scotland, in turning away from the rest of the UK, would be cutting off easy access to its main market, which is, of course, the rest of the UK.
Brian Monteith, we have to leave it there. Christopher McEleny, we appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed for it.